While I make every effort to broadcast correct information, I'm also still learning. I will double check all my facts, but realize that healthcare is a constantly changing science and art. One doctor or healthcare provider may have a different way of doing things from another. I welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. I take no money from supplement or device companies. By listening to this podcast or reading this blog, you agree not to use this podcast or blog as medical advice or to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others, including but not limited to patients that you are treating. Consult your healthcare provider for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast or the website. Under no circumstances shall any guests or contributors to the podcast or blog or any employees, associates, or affiliates of the Boss Body podcast be responsible for damages arising from use of the podcast or the blog. This blog or podcast should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever, including but not limited to establishing the standard of care in a legal sense or as a basis for expert witness testimony. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or the blog.
What's up, guys? It's Dr. Tim Jackson with another episode of the Boss Body Podcast. We talk a great deal on here about gut health, but what does that mean specifically? How can we improve it? How does it impact other areas of our physiology? So I brought in a gut health expert, Ms. Carley Smith, aka the Fairy Gut Mother. Welcome to the show, Carley.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your journey and what got you interested in gut health.
You bet. So I became interested in gut health after being diagnosed with Lyme disease, actually. And I went the whole antibiotics route and felt like I was kind of just taking medications for my medications and they were doing more harm than good. So I went off all my medicine and just started doing my own research. That's when I started learning about gut health and that nearly the entire immune system is located in the gut. So I thought, well, if I heal my gut, maybe I can boost my immune system and suppress the disease. And that's exactly what happened. So I really just became so inspired in the progress in my health that I thought, more people need to know about this. So I went back to school, I studied nutrition, and then started Fairy Gut Mother to help other people.
Awesome. Yeah. So I also had Lyme. I don't know if I told you
Oh,
that.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, I had Lyme, mold toxicity. I likely had the co-infections, but the testing is
Wow.
so unreliable. So I
Yeah.
just treated them empirically. But I used to work out of the building. So if you've seen the movie Under Our Skin with Dr. Jimzik,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, so that building, I used to work and practice out of there.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, it was right before he left, and he went to Washington, D.C., but he was doing IV antibiotics. And I think
Okay.
once in a while, there may be a place for that. But,
Yeah.
the majority of the time, if you don't catch it right away, and most of the time
Yeah.
we don't, then antibiotics after that, 4 to 8 week window, you're not going to see a lot of progress and you're going to do a lot of harm,
Yeah.
not just to the gut, but also to the mitochondria.
Correct.
And so I think you're spot on with that. And one of my mentors, an MD I trained with, he said you can't kill your way to health. And so what he wasn't saying to never use antimicrobials. He was saying
Yeah.
at some point you have to stop and look at the terrain. So when you started on your gut health journey, walk us through like what type of nutritional templates did you follow? Did you go gluten free, autoimmune, paleo, GAPS?
Yes. So I did the GAPS diet. I started out on what's called the full GAPS diet. So, doing more kind of all of the foods that are allowed on the GAPS diet. And I sort of worked my way backwards. I found that a really great place for me to start because my health was not in a good place at that time. And tackling the full elimination and reintroduction of the GAPS diet was just too much for me at that time. So I started with the full GAPS diet, and I actually noticed a little bit of improvement in my health. My cognitive function, my memory came back. I had more energy. So then that's when I started going through the full elimination and reintroduction diet. And basically, it's a lot of bone broth, cooked meats and vegetables, and then certain stages that you start reintroducing foods, fermented foods, and different kinds of foods that eggs, and then you kind of see how your body reacts at that stages and then kind of continue to build from there.
Absolutely. And did you continue treating the Lyme directly, or was most of your program focused on gut health?
No, I stopped all of my medication for Lyme disease and I went just strictly on the GAPS diet. And that really helped me. So when I started improvements in that, I never really went back to the antibiotics. And then from there, it was really like peeling back the layers. I got into, gut health and changed my diet, nutrition, but then I had to make changes in my lifestyle, manage my stress levels, and take better care of myself, get more sleep. I started doing acupuncture more regularly, working with more liver health, and toning and cleansing my liver. Then I did a lot of infrared sauna. So just kind of building from there on different practices that also continue to really help me heal from Lyme.
Awesome. And today, what does your nutrition look like?
So I still maintain a lot of the same principles from the GAPS diet. I believe that a lot of the cooked meats and vegetables, blended soups are part of, one of my favorite things. They're pre-digested. So they're kind of cooked and blended together, much easier for the gut to digest. So I would say most of my diet is more kind of GAPS diet based, but I still incorporate, raw foods in there as well. A lot of bone broth. I'm a huge fan of bone broth. That really helps to, decrease inflammation, helps maintain a strong and healthy gut lining. It's great for your muscles, for your joints. So I'll continue with that. I supplement with a digestive enzyme that helps to break down your foods. And most of us actually have too little stomach acid as compared to too much. And interestingly, from digestive enzymes, actually start decreasing at the age of 20. So most of us could benefit from a digestive enzyme just to help to boost those stomach acid levels and break down our foods a little bit better. So I supplement with that and a probiotic, and then I continue to do things to help my liver so that my body is, constantly able to cleanse and detoxify.
Absolutely. Yeah. And interestingly enough, if stomach acid is optimal, that can help increase the production of pancreatic enzymes because it's all happening in digestive sequencing, right? So
Mhm.
stomach acid first, then bile, then enzymes. I still think there's a place, regardless, for enzymes because our food is so cooked and that, denatures the proteins. And so I think digestive enzymes can only help for most people. I work out a lot and I hear people talking about, oh, you have to get X number of grams of protein and you have to eat within an hour. I'm like, well, you can ingest 500 grams of protein, but if you're only breaking down and assimilating 40 grams of it, then the other is feeding the bad bugs. And so I think that gets missed a lot. And I had on the show Wade Lightheart from BioOptimizers. And he's been doing digestive health, and he's the three-time Canadian national bodybuilding champion. But he's been doing digestive health with his company since 2004. And so I think a lot of people, they think digestion, okay, stomach pain, constipation, diarrhea, but it can present as anything, right? Brain fog, skin issues, weakness, fatigue.
Yes, you don't necessarily have to be struggling with digestive issues to have a gut related problem. And that's the thing that's so important with gut health. I mean, you would never, well, I guess maybe now a little bit more so, but when I first got started in this, there was not a lot of research that even tied gut health back to Lyme disease. I believe gut health is truly the foundation for our health. It's not a trend. It's the foundation. It's where everything starts. So I always recommend to people heal the gut and then start from there. And then you can again start peeling back the layers because so many things are related back to the gut.
Absolutely. And let's talk about the role of stress because I've noticed in my patients and clients over the years,
Mhm.
they can take digestive enzymes, they can take betaine HCl with pepsin, they can eat the right foods, but if they're still stressed and the
Yeah.
vagus nerve, the tone of the vagus nerve is decreased, then they're going to have dysbiosis and GI issues, correct?
Correct. Yeah, there's actually clinical research that states that stress is more damaging on the gut than junk food. So it really is a big part. I tell people gut health is a lifestyle. It's not just a diet. And that was a really big part for me. I was having living in a super high stress life and environment. And I really had to take a look at my lifestyle. Diet was a big part of it. The GAPS diet was a really big part. But then the other side of it was how I was taking care of my body. Was I getting enough sleep? Was I managing my stress levels? And what does that look like? What does managing your stress levels look like? And I think that's different for everybody. Not everybody can sit down and meditate, so it's just trying to find little ways that you can improve your lifestyle and mitigate some of that stress in a way that works best for you, because truly the stress, and especially in the environment that we live in today with our lifestyles, we're constantly overstimulated. So maybe that's just putting down your phone a little bit earlier at night, or maybe taking a little bit of time for yourself, getting outside, getting in nature, going for a walk, finding things that are easy to incorporate into your routine that are sustainable. And I think that's a really big part of managing stress.
Yeah, I just did an interview the other day with biohacker babes, and they were asking me about ways to, mitigate stress. And there's a device, I don't have it on my desk, but it's called the Hoolest, HOOLEST. And you apply it right here, and it sends little vibrations and it activates the vagus nerve. It's one of the best tools I've found. I think the humming and gargling and stuff can help if your vagus nerve is already pretty healthy. But outside of that, cold face plunging can help. The Hulis device, chewing gum may help indirectly, and supplementing with an acetylcholine based supplement like CDP choline, phosphatidylcholine, huperzine A to raise acetylcholine, because the vagus nerve has all those acetylcholine receptors. So have you seen people who've been able to get rid of a significant portion of their gut issues simply by mitigating stress?
Absolutely. And, in some of my clients, I analyze the microbiome. So I know we were talking earlier about gut tests and fecal samples. And so that's some of the things that I'll incorporate into my protocols. And it's very interesting because I had two different clients one time where one had a really great diet, could not figure out why for the life of him why he had gut issues. But a perfect diet. He was a CrossFitter, super in shape, but struggled with really bad digestive issues. And on the other end, I had a client who had, not the best diet, but had zero stress in her life. And she was, just doing things that she loved. She was very active and quite little to no stress. And what was interesting looking at the microbiome was that the one who was not stressed out had actually a better collection of bacteria in her gut than the one who had the perfect diet, but very, very high stress levels. But actually, the client that I was working with, once I got him to start incorporating more practices to help reduce the stress and modify that in his life, he was able to alleviate a lot of the digestive issues. So there's, we talk a lot about gut feelings. There's a big part of our gut that's related back to emotion. There's a huge emotional component to the gut. So yes, I do see that in my clients once they are able to incorporate things and modify their lifestyle to help mitigate some of that stress. It does make a huge impact.
What is your thoughts, or what are your thoughts and opinions on, a lot of people think that when we take probiotics, that they colonize the gut and that they kind of set up shop or residence there. But some of the effects are transient, and it happens through activating other receptors and dendritic cells and things like that, correct?
Well, I think you just have to find what works best for you. I mean, just I think there's a lot of blanket statements out there. Take a probiotic. Drink bone broth, and those are a lot of things that I talk about too. But I think you also have to dive in a little bit more. Sometimes it doesn't always work for everybody. So sometimes probiotics don't work. It's better to start with a postbiotic or butyrate or some sort of supplement to kind of back into gut health. That way it's easier for them to populate the gut in that regard. Making sure that you have a healed gut lining first, I think is really important because if you start activating your detoxification pathways, and the gut is leaky, it's just kind of recycles a lot of those toxins. So it is, yes, doing all the things that, we talk about, but it might also be helpful to work with a practitioner that can help to find what works best for you, because there's never a one size fits all approach. And I talk a lot about the gut being a thumbprint, that it's completely unique to you. So while, we talk about all these things that are helpful, it's not always the case for everybody.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts on using probiotics like Akkermansia mucinophila for weight loss and metabolic rate?
Now, there's a huge connection between weight loss and gut health. So definitely, research shows that certain species of gut bacteria in the gut are linked to maintaining a healthier weight. But, I think it's important. You can take a probiotic all day long, but you really need to make sure that the diet, I think, is the most important thing, that the diet is there that's going to help supplement the probiotic. Because if you're taking a probiotic, and yes, that certain species might be related to a healthier weight, but then you're not feeding the bacteria what it needs to eat to live, to thrive, then, the probiotics aren't really doing a whole lot. So I'm a fan of it, but I think the biggest thing is just making sure that the diet is on the side that's going to help promote the healthy organisms.
Awesome. And how do you go about approaching or working with food sensitivities? What are your thoughts on food sensitivity testing?
I'm really not a fan of them, to be honest. I think it's great to know. I mean, to me, all that does is just tell me that you have a leaky gut, and those foods are seeping into the system. The body's looking at it as foreign and mounting an attack on it. It's not necessarily that those foods are bad. It's just that that's what's getting into your system. Now, food allergies and food sensitivities are two different things. I think food allergies, absolutely, you want to avoid them. Food sensitivities, to me, just tells me there's some sort of dysfunction in the gut. So work to heal the gut lining, and repopulate the microbiome. And generally, you can start reincorporating some of those foods again, and have them be a little bit more tolerable. What I've noticed with clients that do the food sensitivity testing is that they either think that they can't eat anything, and that these foods are inherently bad for them, and it kind of just changes the frame of mind around things. And it's not that those foods are bad. It's just that that's what's seeping into your system. And so the real culprit is the gut lining and the microbiome. And those are the things you need to focus on. So I don't do a whole lot of testing for that with my clients. I think that sometimes it's helpful for them to know. But in most cases, for me, it's really just an indication that there's some sort of compromised gut.
Yeah, I agree. A colleague and I, this was over 10 years ago, we drew 2 tubes of blood on a patient. We put her real name and address and date of birth and all that stuff on one tube. And then we created a fake persona for the other one, sent them to the lab. They came back with 2 totally different reports.
Interesting.
And so I think some of
Wow.
them can be helpful, but I know there's only one lab, to the best of my knowledge, that tests food in the raw and the cooked form, and that's Cyrex. But like you said, if funding or finances are an issue and you have to prioritize, I would say let's work on testing your gut microbiome, and then healing the gut lining, crowding out the bad guys, reseeding the good guys, and then if you want to do the food sensitivity test, you can see what you're sensitive to. But for most people, they're already stressed. And then when they see, oh, I can only eat, 5 or 6 foods, then they get even more stressed. Cortisol goes up, that thins the gut lining, and then we're just in a vicious cycle.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, in terms of elimination diets, how do you approach that? Like if someone's coming to you and they may eat healthfully occasionally, maybe twice a week, but most of their diet is junk food. Do you start them with an elimination diet, or how do you begin?
It's really up to my client and where they're at in their life. I think that, again, it's completely unique to the individual. So if they feel like they can tackle a full elimination and reintroduction, we can absolutely start there. If that's too much for them, you can kind of dip the toe in the water. And that's really what I did. I started full GAPS diet. I wasn't 100%, and it was just what I could handle at the time. But my health started improving, and that was a little bit of motivation for me to continue and then to kind of tackle the whole elimination. And I will say that not everybody needs to do a full elimination and reintroduction diet. So it really kind of depends on where the gut is at. I've worked with a lot of clients that are sort of borderline where, they have a compromised gut, but they might not necessarily need to do that full elimination and reintroduction. So just by incorporating some of those principles from the GAPS diet, the cooked meats and vegetables, the bone broth, the blended soups, easier to digest foods, and then eliminating a lot of the trigger foods, processed foods. That's really all they need, and then maybe adding in a few supplements. So they don't necessarily need to go through that whole elimination and reintroduction. And it's really just kind of figuring out where people are at in their gut health and where they're at in their life and what they can take on.
Absolutely. So we hear a lot today and for the past, 9 or 10 years really about glyphosate. We know it disrupts the Shikimate pathway in the gut, and that's how it got approved is, Monsanto said, to the FDA, well, humans don't have a Shikimate pathway. And it's semantics, right? So we don't, but our microbiome does. I had a client, this was many years ago. She would eat gluten and looked like she was in the second trimester. And she sent me pictures. And then she went on vacation with her family to Italy and she had gluten numerous times. No reaction because it's illegal there. So, what do you see in your clients and what have you learned about glyphosate and its effect on the microbiome?
Yeah, it's really sad, the effect that it has and how widely dispersed it is in our food system and what it's showing up in. Um, I think it's given a lot of foods a bad reputation that, that these certain foods are bad for us, when it's not necessarily the food's problem, it's how the food was prepared, and where the food comes from. So I think it just goes back to really trying to eat as clean as possible, knowing where your food comes from. It doesn't always have to be organic as long as the farmer attests to using better quality practices. Um, and then maybe that's just getting to know your local farmer a little bit better, and where your food comes from, but just really being mindful about the kinds of foods that you're choosing and what's going into your diet, because it is in a lot of places and it quite honestly is everywhere. So it's just something to be very mindful of, and even more reason why you should be incorporating, practices that help to support the gut in the everyday life, because it is going to seep into your daily life at some point. You can't really avoid it, and we can do our best, but that's why it's just equally as important to make sure that you're supporting the gut in other ways, because it definitely does cause some damage.
Yeah, I've, spoken with colleagues who haven't eaten GMOs, in 15 to 20 years, and they detox, 2 to 3 times a year, and they support their detox pathways the other months of the year. And then we do a test, and their levels are still off the charts because if I have a farm here and 30 miles down the road, someone is using glyphosate, it may
Yeah,
take a couple months or even a year, but it's eventually going to get onto my land and my property.
yeah, exactly.
What are your thoughts on this? Well, I guess it's not new, but appeal chemical that's going on to crops. And do you know of ways to get rid of it?
It's alarming, and I think it just kind of goes back to the whole GMO. You just have to be aware, and you have to just do your best. And I think just as a community, try to share information with each other. I mean, I think when you know better, you do better. So, I think it's going to show up in things that we might not have probably anticipated. So that's why the sharing of information with each others is going to become that much more important, so we can keep each other all informed, about where this might be hiding and where we might find it. And that way we can make better choices. I don't know of a way to necessarily get rid of it at this point. Although, again, I will say that this is why it becomes increasingly more important to support the gut in other ways, because these toxins are everywhere. And not just the gut, but then your liver health and making sure that your body can detoxify, and is supported in the best way possible for that. So just kind of doing the things that you can do to help support your body's own natural elimination and detoxification pathways, and that those are clear, so that when you do come in contact with things like this, your body can handle it and process it a little bit better.
Yeah, I tell everyone I work with that, okay, let's say we've gotten rid of the pathogens, we've increased your alpha diversity, your gut lining is healed, your pancreatic enzymes are good, your stomach acid is good. Still, every 3 or 4 months, we should do a round of some sort of gut healing, just because daily stressors, environmental toxins, EMFs, all the different stressors we're exposed to. And you and I were talking earlier about just being bombarded. Like you have, alerts from Facebook, from Instagram, from email, text messages, phone calls, voicemails. And it's just like your central nervous system gets overwhelmed. And
Mhm.
then, if you're in a fight or flight response, you can't heal anything, especially the gut.
Absolutely.
So what's been your biggest surprise in terms of the past 6, 7, 8 years of learning, in terms of finding out new information about the gut?
That's a good question. Honestly, I think I'm just so encouraged to see gut health in just how it's really taken off, and how more people are becoming aware of ways to support their gut, and it's being incorporated into our everyday routines and everyday life. So I know when I first started my gut healing journey, there was hardly anything out there about gut health, which is both a blessing and a curse, because sometimes it can be overwhelming now getting into gut health with so much information out there and not knowing where to start. But I will say overall, I'm very encouraged and pleased and excited to see that it's becoming more of the forefront of our health system, because I do believe it is the foundation for our health. And I am just excited that it's in more people's vocabulary. We're becoming more familiar with it, and people are trying to find ways to help support their gut.
Yeah, I think it's kind of just getting away from that allopathic model of, okay, let's say I have elbow pain. Well, it could be coming from my neck, it could be coming from my upper cervical spine, could be coming from TMJ, and the nerves getting impinged upon there. And so, the source of pain and the site of pain are very often completely different. And so the more we can look outside of that for, okay, if we know people with Alzheimer's and neurodegenerative conditions, that gut imbalances precede those diagnoses by at least 15 to 20 years, then we can start intervening earlier. Because in my studies over the past 12 to 15 years, for every one signal the brain sends to the gut sends 8 back to the brain. And so, if you have brain fog, learning issues, concentration issues, memory issues, I'll tell you a quick anecdote. 5 or 6 years ago, I was working with an attorney, and we worked on several things, but primarily his gut health. And I got an email from him saying he had his most productive month in the past 10 years of practicing law, just from correcting a few simple gut
Wow.
imbalances. And so let's talk for a minute about prebiotics. So I think most people today know about probiotics, but what are prebiotics and why are they so important?
So prebiotic is basically a type of fiber that helps to, in a sense, feed the good bacteria or the probiotics in the gut. So kind of like what I was saying earlier, you could take a probiotic all day long, but if you don't have that fiber, that type of good food essentially for the bacteria, it's really not going to do a whole lot of good. So you can get it from food sources. There are some food sources that are types of prebiotic. Psyllium husk, you can sprinkle that on your food. You could do asparagus, onion. There's a whole list of different kinds of prebiotic type foods out there. And then obviously there are prebiotic supplements as well. My favorite way is just by incorporating it into your diet. So just making sure that your diet is, you know, created in a way that's going to help to feed the good bacteria. And one of those ways is by incorporating more fiber. But it's kind of a catch-22 with gut health. You know, if you're struggling with digestive complications, you know, incorporating more fiber might feel like it's doing more harm than good. So that's where the GAPS diet comes into play, and cooking those fibers really well at first is very important because it's much easier for the gut to digest. And that's why I really like making those soups or blended soups, because not only are you making them with bone broth, so that's helpful for the gut as well, but you're cooking them and blending them together. So all the nutrients are not lost. It's still, you know, all into the soup, but it's cooked and blended. So again, much easier for the gut to digest.
What are your opinions on SIBO and people, you know, reacting to pretty much all foods, or not all foods, but close to all foods, and not tolerating any carbohydrates, even from vegetables?
Again, I think it goes back to the gut is unique. It's a thumbprint. It's completely unique to you. So if you have issues, you know, with digesting those foods, you're going to have to kind of take a step back and figure out ways that you might be able to do this in a different way that helps to support your body where you're at. I've had some SIBO clients that do really well with the GAPS diet. So you know, it kind of just depends. Again, there's not a one size fits all approach. It's just finding out what works for you. Maybe different kinds of fibers work better for some people than others to get started on. But I've also found that generally after a week or two, you know, maybe in the beginning there's some struggling, but then the microbiome does change and it does reflect those changes. So maybe in the beginning there's a little bit of an issue digesting, but if you continue to support with that nutrient rich diet and an easier to digest diet, adding in some supplements to help along the way, the body can adjust.
Have you done much reading or studying on fecal transplants for gut health?
I have. I know that it is very helpful for a lot of people. So I think those that, you know, if they can't tolerate certain foods and are really struggling, that can be a way to, you know, repopulate the microbiome in a different way. So have heard, you know, really successful results from people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the difficulty is in finding a healthy donor, right? Because who hasn't been on, you know, many courses of antibiotics? It's pretty difficult to find someone who's only been on, you know, 1 or 2 courses of antibiotics in their life. We've kind of normalized being on 1 or 2 rounds of antibiotics per year. And so I know people who've benefited greatly from fecal transplants. But I think, yeah, if we need more healthy people so that we can have more healthy donors.
Yeah.
In terms of carnivore diet, so a lot of people are big into that. And I'm not against it at all. I look at, you know, someone's epigenetics, and if you have the APO epsilon 4/4 genotype, you can't tolerate high fat diets, even if it's, you know, grass fed and grass finished. So my thought is, one of the reasons people feel better is that they are avoiding those trigger foods, and it's basically allowing the gall and the malt in the large intestines and small intestines to sort of rest. It gives the immune system a break, kind of like an elimination diet. What do you think?
Yeah, I know the carnivore diet has helped a lot of people. I mean, in a sense, the GAPS diet is somewhat of a variation of the carnivore diet. In the initial stages, you are eating a lot of cooked meats and bone broth, so it's very heavy on that. And sometimes, you know, even that Dr. Natasha says in the GAPS diet that sometimes you have to get a little off balance in the diet to get a little balanced. So overall, a diet that would, you know, maintain a healthy microbiome might not be the same diet that heals a gut. So, you know, sometimes a lot of those foods that are high in animal proteins and fats are what the body needs to help heal the gut lining. But then to maintain it might be a little bit less on that and then more on some of those, good quality fibers that promote the good bacteria. But I am a fan of it to some degree. I don't think it's something that you would want to do for a long period of time. And they'll even stress that with the GAPS diet that, maybe 1 to 2 years max. You don't want to restrict a lot of nutrients. And I think that there's some research out there that suggests, a diet that's too high in animal fats and proteins can cause an overgrowth of more pathogens in the gut. So it's kind of that delicate balance where you might need it for a specific time to do, heal the gut lining or do what you need to do. But then, after a while, then you can start to incorporate other foods and have more of a balance in there.
Absolutely. So, in terms of you cooking and preparing your own food, what does that look like? Do you prepare all your own food? Do you ever eat prepackaged food?
I do most of my own cooking. I mean, occasionally I go out to eat, but very rarely. I meal prep for a lot of my clients as well. So I'm usually just always cooking. But I prefer my own foods versus going out anyways. I know what quality ingredients I'm using. I feel better when I eat my own food. So I just tend to enjoy doing that for myself. And that's something that, I've kind of have always stuck with after healing my gut.
Awesome. What's something that you know today that you wish you would have known at the very beginning of your journey?
Um, I think that the big part about what lifestyle plays in the health of the gut. Stress and mental health, I think, are a huge component of that. And I was so diet focused, which I think, it all serves a time and a place. So I'm grateful for the journey that I have and that I've been on. So it's got me to where I am. And I do believe that the diet was a really big part of that, but probably more that I wish I would have had a healthier balance in my life of taking better care of myself on the personal side of things. I think that would have probably been a little bit easier.
So, where can people find you?
Just social media at Fairy Gut Mother, and then my website, just fairygutmother.com.
Awesome. Well, we're going to put those links up. Thank you for the work that you're
Thank you.
doing. Thanks for coming on the show. Hopefully, we can have you back
Yes,
on in the future
absolutely.
for some updates and keep up the great work.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.